the search for Savannah Guthrie's mother, Nancy. Tonight, investigators searching the home of Savannah's sister and brother-in-law.
I beg you now to return our mother to us so that we can celebrate with her. This is the only way we will have peace.
At 1:47 in the morning, a masked man in gloves walked up to Nancy Guthrie's Tucson home, and according to reporting from ABC News, that doorbell camera footage became the first terrifying clue in a kidnapping case now tied to more than $1 million in rewards. But months later, people online aren't dissecting DNA results or the Bitcoin ransom demand. They're obsessed with one cryptic name buried inside a 2015 book acknowledgement. And somehow, the deeper they looked, the stranger the story became. What happens when you discover that the name everyone's obsessed with belongs to the reporter covering the story? The book page that broke the internet. A blurry photograph of a single book page hit X on May 22, 2026, and within hours, people were treating it like someone had leaked classified evidence from the Nancy Guthrie investigation. According to reporting from Hindustan Times, the image was posted by Jonathan Lee Riches, a self-described investigator known online for inserting himself into high-profile cases. The page came from a 2015 book written by Annie Guthrie, Nancy's daughter. And honestly, if you saw the screenshot out of context, you'd immediately understand why people spiraled. Right there in the acknowledgement section was the line everybody latched onto. Tommaso Cioni, my heart, root, and bone. That was it. One poetic sentence buried in a decade-old book. And suddenly, thousands of strangers online were reading it like a coded confession. Here's where things started moving fast. The acknowledgement page also listed several family members by name, including Nancy Guthrie, Savannah Guthrie, and Cameron Guthrie. But another name appeared alongside them, Charlie. And almost instantly, internet detectives decided Charlie had to be important. According to the same Hindustan Times report, users on X started reposting cropped screenshots with captions asking why Annie referred to her mother formally as Nancy Guthrie, instead of simply saying, Mom. One user wrote, anyone else find it weird? She refers to her mom by name? Another focused entirely on the wording toward Tommaso Cioni, saying Annie had an odd way of writing and expression. And that's the moment the story changed. Up until then, the public conversation around Nancy Guthrie's disappearance had focused on actual investigative developments. Security footage from February 1st showed a masked man wearing gloves outside Nancy's Tucson home at 1:47 a.m., according to ABC News. Reports had already confirmed that the FBI obtained DNA evidence collected from the house months earlier. There were ransom texts demanding Bitcoin. Family rewards had climbed past $1 million. Federal investigators were involved. Real evidence existed. But online, a literary acknowledgement page was suddenly getting more attention than the forensic timeline. Think about that for a second. A missing person investigation involving the FBI, Quantico testing, ransom demands, and surveillance footage somehow got pushed aside because people became convinced a poetic dedication from 2015 contained hidden meaning. And get this, many of the posts spreading the theory weren't even claiming to have evidence. They were just fueled by vibes, tone, and interpretation. That happens constantly online, especially in cases involving wealthy families or public figures. People start reading ordinary language like it's symbolic. A phrase becomes suspicious because it sounds emotional. Someone writes poetically, and suddenly, strangers decide the wording itself must hide trauma, guilt, or secrets. But according to reporting from Inkle, there is absolutely no public evidence connecting Annie Guthrie's book acknowledgments to Nancy's disappearance. None. Law enforcement hasn't referenced the page. The FBI hasn't cited it. Investigators haven't linked Charlie to the case. Still, the speculation kept mutating. Part of the reason is that the phrase itself sounds incredibly intimate. My heart, root, and bone isn't corporate thank you language. It's emotional, literary, deeply personal. And on social media, Emotional language gets treated almost like forensic material. People weren't analyzing fingerprints anymore. They were analyzing tone. You could literally watch strangers dissect sentence structure like detectives examining a crime scene. But wait, it gets weirder. The man who amplified the page, Jonathan Lee Riches, isn't a law enforcement official. According to the reports circulating, the screenshot was posted by him through his @JLR Investigates account on May 22, 2026. He has no publicly known role in the official investigation, no badge, no confirmed access to evidence. Yet, his post exploded across X because the internet rewards mystery far faster than patience, especially when the mystery sounds literary. Meanwhile, buried underneath all this chaos were details people almost stopped talking about. According to reporting tied to the February investigation timeline, ransom messages demanding cryptocurrency had already surfaced by February 5th. The FBI was still processing DNA results from evidence sent to Quantico. Nearly 110 days had passed since Nancy vanished from her Arizona home. Her family still had no public answers, and somehow the conversation online drifted toward whether a writer sounded too poetic. That disconnect is honestly one of the strangest parts of this entire case. Real investigations move slowly. Evidence has chain of custody procedures, lab timelines, and verification standards. Internet speculation moves in the opposite direction. It feeds on immediacy. One screenshot becomes a theory. The theory becomes a thread. Then suddenly, thousands of people are treating interpretation like discovery. You can actually see the shift happen in real time when reading the replies under the original posts. Some users tried grounding the conversation, pointing out that authors often write dramatic acknowledgements because they're writers. Others completely ignored that and began constructing theories around Charlie, Tommaso Cioni, and family dynamics that no investigator has publicly supported. The more uncertain the facts became, the more confident the theories sounded. And here's the uncomfortable part. Once an idea catches fire online, people start searching for evidence to support it, instead of asking whether evidence existed in the first place. So while FBI analysts were reportedly testing physical evidence connected to Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, millions of views were piling onto a decade-old book page that authorities have never identified as relevant. That's the reality of modern true crime now. Sometimes the loudest clue isn't a clue at all. It's just the thing the internet decided felt important. But if this book page isn't evidence, then who exactly is this Charlie that everyone's obsessing over? The name everyone was wrong about. The entire Charlie mystery started collapsing the second somebody did the one thing almost nobody online bothered to do: scroll back up and read the byline. Seriously, that's it. According to the Hindustan Times article that helped launch this viral theory, the story itself was written by Charlie Langston and published on May 23, 2026. The same name people were treating like some hidden figure buried inside Annie Guthrie's acknowledgements page was sitting right there at the top of the article in plain sight. And somehow, almost nobody noticed. For days, posts kept circulating asking, "Who is Charlie?" YouTube creators uploaded dramatic thumbnails with arrows pointing toward the name. One video published May 24, 2026, titled, "Who is Charlie? The name Nancy's family won't explain," spent an entire segment treating Charlie like a shadowy missing piece of the puzzle. But according to the video itself on YouTube, they never actually identified Charlie Langston as the reporter covering the case. That detail changes the entire tone of the story, because suddenly, this stops being a mystery about a hidden individual and starts becoming a perfect example of how conspiracy theories form in real time. People saw a name repeated inside coverage about Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, connected it emotionally to the acknowledgements page, then built an entire narrative without checking whether the name already had an obvious explanation. And get this, Charlie Langston wasn't some random one-off journalist who appeared briefly in the story. According to the New York Post article published March 21, 2026, Charlie Langston had already written extensively about the Nancy Guthrie investigation weeks earlier, including coverage about the FBI examining a vacant house near Nancy's Tucson neighborhood for possible connections to the abduction. Same reporter, same case. Then there's another article, published May 14, 2026, on BrokerChris.com, discussing a neighbor who reportedly saw a strange man lingering in the area before Nancy vanished. That article was also written by Charlie Langston, so the irony here becomes almost unbelievable. Internet users became suspicious of the reporter's first name while actively consuming the reporter's own reporting. Think about how strange that is for a second. The answer was visible the entire time. It wasn't hidden in encrypted files or buried inside some sealed court document. It was literally printed at the top of the articles people were screenshotting and reposting. But confirmation bias does something fascinating to the human brain. Once people decide a mystery exists, they stop looking for ordinary explanations. Every detail starts feeling intentional. Every coincidence begins looking designed. A common name suddenly sounds sinister because people already expect it to be. That's exactly what happened here. The acknowledgement page from Annie Guthrie's 2015 book listed multiple people she thanked, including Nancy Guthrie, Savannah Guthrie, Cameron Guthrie, and Charlie. Nothing in the text identified Charlie as a suspect, an accomplice, or even somebody connected to the kidnapping investigation. According to the reports discussing the page, Charlie appeared in the same context as other personal acknowledgments that authors commonly include in books: friends, family, literary contacts, people who mattered to the writing process. But online speculation transformed a normal acknowledgement into a supposed breadcrumb trail. And honestly, part of the reason this spiraled so hard is that true crime culture has trained people to believe every tiny detail matters. If someone uses unusual wording, it must mean something. If a name appears twice, there must be a connection. If a sentence sounds emotional, viewers assume hidden conflict. That mindset creates a dangerous feedback loop where speculation starts feeling smarter than verification. Meanwhile, the actual facts surrounding Nancy Guthrie's disappearance remained painfully unresolved. According to reports, throughout late May 2026, nearly 110 days had passed since she disappeared from her Tucson home on February 1st. Federal investigators were still processing leads. Rewards remained active. Authorities had announced no arrest. DNA evidence collected from the residence was reportedly undergoing FBI analysis. None of that had changed. Yet the internet had become obsessed with the wrong clue entirely. Here's where it gets even more revealing. According to the @HT Tweets post on X sharing the Hindustan Times story, the byline identifying Charlie Langston was visible directly inside the social media post itself. You didn't even need to open the article to see it. The information people needed to debunk the theory existed at the exact same place the theory was spreading. That's what makes this story less about one viral misunderstanding and more about how misinformation actually works now. Most conspiracy theories don't survive because evidence supports them. They survive because hardly anybody slows down long enough to verify basic details before reposting them. And once a theory becomes emotionally satisfying, correcting it almost feels disappointing. People wanted Charlie to be mysterious. They wanted the hidden name angle. A journalist covering the case isn't nearly as exciting as an unknown figure buried inside literary acknowledgments. Reality rarely competes well against suspense, but reality matters here because a real family is still living through this investigation. Nancy Guthrie is still missing. The FBI is still involved. Public attention still affects the direction conversations move online. And somewhere in the middle of all that, a reporter's first name accidentally became internet mythology simply because thousands of viewers skipped one basic step: checking the source material carefully. You can almost trace the exact moment the confusion spread. One person asked, "Who is Charlie?" Another repeated it. Then somebody made a video. Then screenshots started circulating without context. And before long, people treated the question itself as proof that something suspicious existed. That's how modern conspiracy theories often begin, not with hidden evidence, but with ordinary information stripped of context until it feels mysterious. But here's something even more important that would have killed this entire conspiracy theory before it started. Do you know when that book was published? 11 years old, Zero Connection. October 1st, 2015. That date alone should have stopped this entire conspiracy theory dead in its tracks. According to Tupelo Press, Annie Guthrie's poetry collection, The Good Dark, was officially published more than a decade before Nancy Guthrie disappeared from her Tucson home on February 1st, 2026. 11 years, not 11 months, not recently uncovered private writings. An actual published poetry book has been sitting in bookstores since the Obama administration. And somehow, people online were still treating one acknowledgement page like investigators had discovered fresh evidence connected to a kidnapping. That timeline changes everything. The book wasn't hidden. It wasn't leaked. It wasn't part of an FBI document dump. According to Barnes & Noble, The Good Dark is a 68-page poetry collection published by Tupelo Press with ISBN 978-1936797-592. It's been publicly available since October 2015. Anybody could have checked that within seconds. But here's where context completely collapsed online. The internet encountered poetic language during an active missing person investigation and immediately stripped that language away from the environment it originally belonged to. Instead of reading the acknowledgements as part of a literary poetry collection, people started reading them like coded messages connected to a 2026 crime. Those are two entirely different lenses. And once you understand what kind of book this actually is, the dramatic wording suddenly stops sounding suspicious. According to the Tupelo Press description, the collection explores human consciousness and its tangled subjectivity through 3 acts called Unwitting, Chorus, and Body. This is not corporate nonfiction, it's poetry. Dense, emotional, literary poetry. The entire book is built around metaphor, abstraction, and intimate language. So when Annie Guthrie wrote Tommaso Cioni, My Heart, Root and Bone, she was writing inside the exact genre where heightened emotional language is normal. Think about how many poets, novelists, musicians, and artists dedicate works using language that would sound strange in everyday conversation. Someone says, "You are my soul" in a poem, and nobody panics because context matters. But remove one sentence from the literary world, drop it into the middle of a viral kidnapping discussion, and suddenly people start treating metaphor like evidence. That's exactly what happened here. According to the Hindustan Times report, users online called Annie's writing style odd and questioned the emotional intensity of the acknowledgements page. But most of those reactions ignored the fact that the material came from an 11-year-old poetry collection specifically designed around expressive language. People were reacting to poetry while pretending they were analyzing evidence. And there's another detail people missed. According to Inkle, literary acknowledgements and dedications often contain poetic language that is not meant to be interpreted literally. The same report also stated clearly that there is no evidence in public reporting connecting the excerpt to Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. None. No confirmed investigative link. No FBI statement suggesting relevance. No indication that the acknowledgement page influenced the direction of the case. Meanwhile, the actual investigation looked entirely different from the internet narrative forming around it. According to CBS News, the real case involved ransom communications demanding Bitcoin payments sent to a local Arizona news station after Nancy disappeared. Federal investigators reportedly received DNA evidence collected from the residence months later, after testing by a private Florida laboratory working with the Pima County Sheriff's Department. That's the real-world side of this story. Surveillance footage, forensics, ransom demands, lab testing. And over here on the internet side, people were arguing about poetry acknowledgements written in 2015. The contrast is honestly staggering. ABC News also reported that authorities described some of the material being tested with advanced technology as not new evidence, which matters because online speculation kept acting as if the book itself had suddenly become part of a breakthrough discovery. It hadn't. The acknowledgement page existed publicly for over a decade before Nancy vanished. You can almost feel two separate realities developing around the same case. Investigators working methodically through timelines, evidence processing, and witness interviews on one side. Viral theories fueled by screenshots and emotional interpretation on the other. And social media absolutely accelerates that disconnect because context gets flattened. A cropped image moves faster than an explanation. A suspicious-sounding phrase spreads faster than publication history. Most users encounter information stripped away from dates, genre, source material, or background. They see one emotionally loaded screenshot and build the rest of the story themselves. That's why the publication date matters so much. Once you realize The Good Dark came out in October 2015, the entire conspiracy framework starts collapsing under its own weight. The mysterious wording predates the kidnapping by 11 years. The Charlie mystery turns out to be the reporter covering the story. The acknowledgements page belongs to a publicly available poetry collection, and law enforcement has never connected any of it to Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. But because the internet encountered those details out of order, ordinary literary language was briefly transformed into supposed hidden evidence. And honestly, that might be the most revealing part of this entire story. Not the page itself, not the phrase root and bone, not even the viral speculation. It's how quickly people became convinced that coincidence and mystery automatically meant connection. So we have an 11-year-old book dedication and a name belonging to the reporter, which raises the question, how does this kind of misinformation spread in missing person cases? How conspiracy theories eat missing person cases? Nearly 110 days had passed since Nancy Guthrie disappeared, and somehow the loudest conversation online became a poetry dedication from 2015. That detail alone tells you almost everything about how modern conspiracy theories work. According to Hindustan Times, Nancy vanished on February 1st, 2026. The viral obsession with Annie Guthrie's acknowledgement page didn't explode until the final week of May, almost 4 months later. Real investigators had already spent months processing evidence, interviewing witnesses, analyzing surveillance footage, and coordinating between agencies. But in less than 5 days, social media turned an old poetry book into the center of the public conversation. And honestly, that shift says something deeply uncomfortable about how people consume true crime now. Because here's what the actual investigation looked like while the internet obsessed over Charlie and root and bone. According to ABC News, federal investigators obtained DNA evidence connected to Nancy's residence after material was first examined by a private laboratory in Florida, working with the Pima County Sheriff's Department. The evidence was eventually forwarded to the FBI laboratory in Quantico, Virginia. As of late May 2026, those results still had not been publicly released. That's real investigative work. Slow, technical, careful. Meanwhile, online speculation moved at the speed of screenshots. The suspect caught on doorbell footage was described by investigators as roughly 5'10", average build, around 59 years old, wearing gloves and a mask during the early morning hours outside Nancy's Tucson home. Authorities reportedly believed the kidnapping was targeted. According to BBC News, Sheriff Chris Nanos publicly stated, "We believe we know why they did this." Think about that sentence carefully. Law enforcement believed a motive existed. This wasn't random chaos to investigators. They were looking at a targeted abduction with physical evidence, surveillance footage, and forensic analysis. But those details weren't dominating algorithms. Instead, the internet latched onto ambiguity because ambiguity performs better online than certainty. A blurry theory spreads faster than confirmed evidence. A mysterious phrase gets more engagement than forensic timelines. People share things that feel eerie, emotional, or unresolved, because unresolved stories invite participation. Everyone gets to become part detective, part storyteller. And that dynamic creates real consequences in active missing person cases. According to TV Insider, former FBI Assistant Director John Miller warned that subsequent ransom notes connected to the case were likely fraudulent and probably sent by opportunists trying to exploit public attention. That detail matters because it shows how quickly high-profile investigations attract noise from people entirely unrelated to the crime itself. Miller also made another fascinating observation. The answer is in Tucson, he said, arguing the suspect was likely local and familiar with Nancy's routine and living situation. That's grounded investigative thinking, geographic familiarity, behavioral analysis, victim targeting patterns. Compare that to what social media was doing during the same period. Instead of discussing local suspect behavior, people were analyzing decade-old poetry metaphors. Instead of focusing on the masked individual captured on security footage, viewers debated whether "my heart, root, and bone" sounded emotionally suspicious. And get this, those theories often became more popular precisely because they sounded dramatic. Reality usually isn't cinematic enough for the internet. Real investigations involve waiting, evidence processing, contradictions, dead ends, procedural work. Conspiracy theories replace all that uncertainty with immediate emotional payoff. Suddenly, every detail feels connected. Every sentence sounds loaded. Every coincidence becomes intentional. You can actually see this pattern happen across almost every major missing person case now. Someone screenshots one detail out of context. A creator builds a theory around it. Another creator reacts to that theory. Then audiences start treating repetition itself as proof that credibility exists. But repetition isn't evidence. Remember that family video appeal from early February? According to the New York Times, Savannah Guthrie pleaded publicly for her mother's return, saying, "We plead with you to return our mother that we celebrate with." Retired FBI agent Lance Leasing later noted the phrasing around "celebrate" could sound emotionally ambiguous depending on interpretation. Did it mean celebrating Nancy's safe return, or something darker? Now here's where things get interesting. That ambiguity became another example of how internet speculation feeds itself. Instead of recognizing emotional stress during a family plea, people began dissecting individual word choices like hidden signals. It's the same pattern all over again. Emotional language gets transformed into supposed coded meaning, and the algorithms absolutely reward that behavior because emotionally charged uncertainty keeps people watching longer. According to CBS News, the FBI offered a $50,000 reward for information leading to Nancy's recovery or the arrest of those responsible. Separately, according to a February 24, 2026 report on YouTube, the Guthrie family raised that reward amount dramatically, offering up to $1 million. That's how serious the real case is. There were also tensions between agencies. According to Hindustan Times reporting, FBI Director Kash Patel accused the Pima County Sheriff's Department of failing to cooperate properly during the early stages of the investigation. Accusations that Sheriff Nanos publicly denied. So behind the scenes, there were real jurisdictional disputes, real procedural disagreements, and real investigative pressure unfolding while the internet focused on poetry. That disconnect matters because speculation doesn't just distract audiences. It can distort public understanding of what investigators are actually doing. One side of this story involves DNA evidence, ransom demands, targeted abduction theories, and a masked suspect caught on camera outside a Tucson home. The other side involves social media users convincing themselves that a reporter's first name hidden in a poetry collection must secretly matter. And the scary part is how easy it becomes for the second story to overshadow the first, because mystery spreads, facts wait. So if the book page isn't evidence and Charlie is the reporter, what does the FBI actually have that matters? What the FBI actually found. The first thing that really matters in this entire case isn't a book page, a viral screenshot. or the noise that exploded online. It's sitting quietly in an FBI lab in Quantico, still incomplete, still waiting to speak. A hair sample pulled from Nancy Guthrie's residence back in early 2026, originally handled by a private Florida laboratory working alongside the Pima County Sheriff's Department, was handed over to federal investigators in April 2026, according to the Hindustan Times. That sample isn't being treated like new evidence. According to reporting from Inkle, FBI officials have been clear that it's old material being re-examined with newer forensic systems, the same evidence looked at with sharper tools. That alone tells you something important. The investigation isn't chasing internet theories. It's grounded in physical traces left inside that house. A BC News confirms the sample is an original hair strand recovered from the residence, which means this is biological evidence tied directly to the scene. But nothing has been released publicly from the Quantico analysis, and that silence has stretched for months, feeding impatience outside the investigation while the science continues inside it. While social media was arguing about a 2015 poetry book and a misunderstood name, the FBI was quietly running lab work on DNA evidence that actually came from the crime scene. According to CBS News, right after the disappearance in February 2026, the FBI offered a $50,000 reward for information leading to an arrest or recovery. Later reporting from a YouTube briefing shows the family independently increasing pressure with up to a $1 million reward. Those are signals that investigators still believe there are actionable leads in the real world, not the digital noise. The real-world picture gets sharper when you line up the timeline. ABC News documents a masked man seen at 1:47 a.m. outside Nancy's residence, described as approximately 5 feet 10 inches, average build, wearing gloves, and a face covering. That detail matters because it's tied to an actual recorded timestamp, not interpretation. FBI teams also searched 2 homes and a vehicle parked outside a Tucson restaurant, showing the investigation is anchored in geography, movement, and human proximity. Former FBI Assistant Director John Miller, speaking in an interview published by TV Insider on April 28, 2026, pointed out that ransom notes appearing after the initial incident are likely fraudulent, opportunistic noise with no real connection to Nancy's disappearance. He added something even more direct. The answer is in Tucson, suggesting the suspect is local, familiar with the environment, and embedded in the same area Nancy lived in. That's a completely different direction from online discussions. No poetry, no book dedications, no symbolic decoding, just geography and behavior. Sheriff Chris Nanos, in a BBC News interview, reinforced that angle by describing the case as targeted, suggesting it wasn't random, but directed toward a specific person. Even the early confusion reflects how complex this has been. According to Reddit discussions, a person of interest was briefly detained and released after questioning, showing how fluid early leads were. Despite DNA analysis, physical searches, rewards totaling over $1 million, and federal involvement, no suspect has been publicly named after roughly 110 days, according to the Hindustan Times timeline. There's also internal friction running through the case. Reports mention FBI Director Kash Patel accusing local authorities of failing to fully cooperate in the early stages, a claim the sheriff's office denied. That tension can slow information flow, and timing is everything. You've got 2 parallel realities sitting side by side. One is loud, fast, and speculative, built from social media fragments and misunderstood details. The other is slower, heavier, built from DNA strands, doorbell footage, search warrants, and reward-backed leads moving through legal systems. Right in the middle of that gap is where confusion grows, because while the internet keeps circling symbolic phrases, the FBI is still waiting on what the evidence in Quantico actually says. Here's the thing that should make us all pause. That mysterious, viral Charlie was actually just Charlie Langston, the reporter covering the case for the Hindustan Times. Think about how easily we all got fooled. Will you double-check your sources before buying into the next viral theory? Or are we going to keep solving these internet mysteries entirely wrong?